Before we dive in, if you crave dark truths, buried secrets, and cases they thought were untouchable, hit subscribe, leave a comment, and stay close because this one doesn't let go. The rain had washed the city clean by the time they found her. Dawn crept over the industrial shoreline, pale and cold, revealing a shape tangled in reeds near the waterline. At first glance, it looked like debris, another piece of the river's forgotten junk. Then a patrol officer noticed the shoe.
Clean.
Expensive. Completely out of place. Minutes later, red and blue lights cut through the fog, and the crime scene tape snapped tight in the wind. Her name was Elena Morris, 32 years old, a financial analyst with no criminal record, no known enemies, and a calendar booked weeks in advance. She had vanished the night before after leaving a charity gala downtown. No signs of a struggle. No witnesses willing to say they saw anything. And now, here she was, placed, not dumped, as if whoever did this wanted her found exactly where she lay. Detective Daniel Crow arrived as the coroner zipped the bag. Crow had seen enough scenes to know when something felt wrong. This wasn't messy. This wasn't emotional. This was precise. Elena's phone, wallet, and jewelry were all missing, yet there were no defensive wounds. No drag marks. No panic frozen into the ground. It was as if she had simply gone to sleep, where she wasn't supposed to. By noon, the media had a name for it, the perfect crime. Elena's last known movements painted a clean picture. Security footage showed her leaving the hotel at 9:42 p.m., stepping into the rain beneath a black umbrella. She paused at the curb, checked her phone, and smiled at a message no one could access. Then she disappeared into traffic. No screams. No struggle. Just a woman swallowed by the city. Crow and his partner, Maya Lin, started where they always did, Elena's life. Her apartment was immaculate. Too immaculate. No broken locks, no missing clothes, no sign she'd planned to leave town. Her laptop was gone, though the charger sat neatly coiled on the desk. Whoever took it knew exactly what they were looking for. Friends described Elena as careful, private, intelligent. She didn't drink much. She didn't trust easily. She didn't get into strangers' cars. Which raised the question no one wanted to ask out loud. What made her do it that night? The autopsy complicated everything. Time of death fell within a narrow window, but the cause wasn't obvious. No blunt force trauma. No visible injuries that explained why a healthy woman would suddenly die. Toxicology would take weeks. For now, the report read like a dead end. One more reason the case would stall. Days turned into weeks. Tips flooded in, then dried up. A man claimed he'd seen Elena arguing with someone near the gala, but CCTV didn't back him up. Another swore he'd offered her a ride. His alibi collapsed under scrutiny. Everyone had a story. None of them fit. Crow felt the pressure building. High-profile case. Clean victim. No suspect. No weapon. The kind of investigation that chewed up careers and spit them out. He kept returning to the riverbank in his mind. The way Elena had been positioned, the quiet confidence of it. This wasn't random. It was intentional. Then the phone records came back. Elena's phone had pinged a tower miles from the gala minutes after she vanished, an area she had no reason to be near. The signal appeared once, then went dark forever. Someone had turned it off. Not crushed it. Not destroyed it. Turned it off. Calmly. Maya traced the ping to a cluster of warehouses scheduled for demolition. The buildings were old, forgotten, owned by shell companies that led nowhere. When they searched the area, they found nothing. No phone. No witnesses. Just dust and locked doors. The case went cold faster than anyone expected. Months passed, then years. Evidence aged. Leads evaporated. Files thickened with theories, but no truth. Elena Morris became a name in a database, a photo on a corkboard, a case detectives avoided making eye contact with. Promotions came and went. Crow stayed, haunted by the precision of it all. 20 years later, the city was different. The warehouses were gone, replaced by glass and steel. New detectives skimmed old files with polite detachment. The crime was considered unsolvable, perfect in its execution, until a routine audit flagged a piece of evidence that was never supposed to exist. At the bottom of a mislabeled box, buried beneath reports no one had opened in decades, was a sealed envelope. Inside it was a single item logged but never analyzed, a storage locker key, tagged the night Elena disappeared. And written on the tag, in faded ink, were 3 words that made Crow's hands shake. Do not process. But when they traced the locker number, what they found inside reopened a nightmare no one was ready to face. The storage facility sat at the edge of the city like a forgotten scar, rows of rusted doors, flickering lights, and a security office that smelled of burnt coffee and dust. Detective Daniel Crow stood in front of locker 317, the metal cold beneath his palm. 20 years. That's how long this key had waited. 20 years while a killer walked free. When the door screeched open, the air inside felt heavier, older. The first thing they saw was a cardboard box sealed with yellowed tape. Then another. And another. Each one labeled in neat, deliberate handwriting. Dates. Locations. Times. Crow didn't need to read further to understand what they were standing in. This wasn't storage. It was an archive. Inside the first box were photographs, surveillance stills, printed emails, handwritten notes. Elena Morris wasn't the only woman. There were others. Some alive, some not. Each file detailed routines, weaknesses, daily schedules. Whoever created this didn't stalk randomly. They selected, studied, waited. Maya Lin felt her stomach turn as she flipped through a folder marked with a red. Inside was Elena's name, her phone number, a photo taken from across the street of her apartment, time-stamped 3 weeks before her death. The gala wasn't the beginning. It was the end. They called it in immediately. The locker was sealed. Evidence logged. Forensics swarmed the site like ants, but the damage was already done. Not to the case, but to the people working it. The implication was horrifying. Someone had built a system, a ritual, and Elena had been just one chapter in a much longer story. As the files were digitized, a pattern emerged. Every victim was connected, but not in obvious ways. Different professions, different neighborhoods, different social circles. What tied them together was access. Each woman worked in finance, law, or city planning. Each had exposure to sensitive information. And each had, at some point, crossed paths with the same consulting firm. North Shore Strategic Solutions. On paper, it was harmless. Risk assessments, compliance audits, corporate consulting. The kind of firm that operated quietly, invisibly. But buried in the old records was a detail Crow couldn't ignore. Elena had flagged irregularities tied to North Shore months before she died. She'd requested internal documents. Then she'd gone silent. Crow requested personnel records. Most employees had moved on, retired, or vanished into private lives. One name, however, refused to stay buried. Lucas Reed, former senior analyst. Impeccable resume. No criminal history. Left the firm abruptly 2 months after Elena's death. No forwarding address. No social media footprint. It was as if he'd evaporated. Maya dug deeper. Credit reports showed nothing for years, then sudden activity, small transactions, careful ones, spread across states. Reed hadn't disappeared. He'd gone underground. As they prepared a warrant, something else surfaced. A forensic analyst flagged a partial fingerprint lifted from one of the storage boxes. It wasn't in any criminal database, but it was in a private registry, uploaded during a background check. North Shore Strategic Solutions required biometric scans for high-clearance employees. The print matched Lucas Reed. The realization hit like a gunshot. This wasn't just a killer who got lucky. This was someone who understood systems, evidence, and delay. Someone who knew how investigations worked and how to sabotage them. Someone who had likely manipulated the original case from the inside. Crow replayed the early days in his mind. The missing laptop. The turned-off phone. The autopsy that said nothing. How many steps had been guided by invisible hands? They moved fast. Reed's last known transaction led to a rural property outside state lines. Remote. Isolated. The kind of place no one stumbled upon by accident. Local authorities were looped in, but Crow insisted on going himself. 20 years had already been lost. He wasn't about to lose another hour. The house looked abandoned, peeling paint, broken fence, no lights. But inside, it was immaculate. Lived in. Organized. On a desk near the window sat a laptop, open, humming softly. The screen displayed a familiar interface, a database. Names. Dates. Red dots. One of the files was marked active. Before Crow could read further, a sound echoed from the back of the house, a door closing. Footsteps. Calm. Unhurried. Maya's voice crackled through his radio, sharp with panic. Daniel, someone just accessed the evidence server. They're deleting files. Crow raised his weapon, heart pounding, as a shadow moved at the end of the hallway. Because whoever had built the perfect crime hadn't stopped. They were still watching. The hallway smelled of dust and metal, the kind of air that hadn't moved in years. Crow advanced one step at a time, gun raised, every nerve screaming. At the far end, a door stood half open, light spilling across the floor in a thin, deliberate line. Whoever was back, there wasn't running. They were waiting. Lucas Reed, Crow called out, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. It's over. For a moment, there was nothing. Then a calm voice drifted back, almost amused. You should have left it buried, detective. It was cleaner that way. Reed stepped into the light. He looked older than the photos, grayer at the temples, but otherwise unchanged. Relaxed. Unafraid. He raised his hands slowly, not in surrender, but in performance. Like a man who had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. They cuffed him without resistance. No chase. No struggle. That, more than anything, unsettled Crow. Killers didn't usually give up when the end arrived. But Reed seemed relieved. At the station, the interrogation room lights hummed softly as Reed sat across from Crow and Maya. He declined a lawyer. Asked for water. Smiled faintly. You spent 20 years chasing ghosts, Reed said. I admire the dedication. Crow slid a photo across the table. Elena Morris, smiling at the camera. Why her? Reed studied the photo, then leaned back. Because she saw what she wasn't supposed to see. And because she thought the system would protect her. The confession came slowly, methodically. Reed explained how North Shore wasn't just consulting, it was leverage. Information sold quietly to the highest bidder. When Elena uncovered irregularities, Reed was assigned to manage the risk. He didn't kill out of rage or fear. He killed to preserve order. To protect a machine that rewarded silence. She trusted me, he said flatly. That made it easy. The storage locker was his insurance policy. Proof of control. Proof that if he ever fell, others would follow. He'd marked the evidence do not process because he knew how overwhelmed departments worked. He knew no one would question it. And for 20 years, he was right. As Reed spoke, another team raced to stop the digital purge. They arrived seconds too late. Most of the files were gone. Wiped clean with military precision. Names erased. Timelines destroyed. The archive that could have exposed dozens of crimes reduced to fragments. Still, it was enough. Reed was charged. The press descended. Headlines screamed about the architect killer and the crime that fooled a city for 2 decades. Families of victims wept on courthouse steps. Crow testified, his voice steady, his eyes hollow. Justice, at last, had a name. The verdict was guilty on all counts. Life without parole. The city exhaled. Weeks later, Crow returned to his office after midnight, the building quiet, the case officially closed. He sat alone, staring at Elena's photo one last time. 20 years too late, he thought. 20 years stolen. As he reached to turn off the light, his computer chimed softly. An incoming message. No sender ID. No subject line. Just a single sentence. You never found the first one. Crow's blood ran cold. He traced the message. The server ping didn't match Reed's devices. It didn't match any known location tied to the case. It was routed through systems that no longer existed, credentials that had been revoked years ago. He reopened the evidence logs, scanned the earliest files, and there it was, a detail so small it had survived every purge. The first victim, dated years before Elena, listed as an accidental death, and signed off by a supervisor whose name made Crow's stomach drop. A man who had led the task force, a man who had trained him, a man who had retired with honors. The realization hit harder than any confession ever could. Reed hadn't built the system alone. He had inherited it. Crow leaned back in his chair, the weight of it settling deep in his chest. The case they celebrated as solved was only a chapter. The machine was older, smarter, still breathing. Outside, the city slept, unaware that the truth had only just begun to surface. And somewhere out there, someone was watching, waiting to see if Crow would stop digging now that the world thought the story was over. If this case shook you, remember, there are more like it. And the next one is even darker.